Okay, ladies and gentlemen hold on a second. Uh, yeah, okay. Sorry, Zoom has changed the way that I look for things. They've messed, I won't say they messed things. They've changed it all around. So now I'm spending time trying to find the links that I just knew earlier. This is what happens when you get older. You get accustomed to doing things a certain way, and if someone changes them, I've a lot of my age peers really get mad when things get changed. But I don't know. Things change in technology, so we just have to stay adaptable to it, right? Okay. All right. So I think I'm okay. I'm in record mode. Two announcements I have for you before we get started. Number one. Remember that I did adjust your due date for your research essay, okay? In the syllabus, it's shown as the 28th of March, which is 3 days from now, but uh, I was having trouble with those links. They would not open, so I had to recreate the assignment in Canvas. And by the time I was able to do that, I decided to add a week. So the paper's not due until the 4th of April. The other is I need to make an apology. In fact, at least one of you, thank you, Robert, alerted me to the fact that there was a due date mix up or some error with the lecture next week, which is Heirs to the Roman Empire. What happened is I just, when I create classes, when I create assignments, if I can transfer from one course to another, I will do that. It's just easier. And so what happened was I brought that assignment over from another class and I just forgot to change the due date. So it showed up as March 24th and it shouldn't have been. It's actually April 4th, so, or April 1st. So some of you, thank you. Some of you went ahead and did the assignment. And for those of you who sent me emails asking if you missed it and could you get an extension, I'm the one who has to offer the apology to you and say the due date isn't until April 1st anyway. So I've changed the due date. If you've already done the assignment, just leave it. I'll grade it after April 1st, okay? And for those of you who haven't done it yet, the lecture, wait a minute. Uh, oh, that's right. Next week is the 30th of March. Oh, boy, these dates are really getting to me. Okay, so next week will be that lecture uh, on the April. No, it'll be March. Oh dear. Oh dear. I'm wrong on that anyway. Well, I'll fix it. I'll fix it. Today, oh, never mind. I'm getting confused on these dates. Just don't, if you haven't done the assignment yet, don't do it. Let me fix these dates. I don't have, I don't, oh boy. Okay. Anyway, let's get into, I do know today's lecture, what that is at least. So let's get into this. Um, let's see, I need to do this so that you can, we're covering three religions today. Normally, during the 16-week course, I would do these separately. I would have separate lectures for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But since you're a compressed class, we're doing this all in one shot. Okay, so let's get busy with this. Let's take a look at Judaism first.
What is a Jew? That question is confusing, not just to non Jews, but often to Jews themselves. Are Jews a race, a religion, a nation, a people, a family, a culture? Many people would say they're all of the above. And the reality is the Jewish people are all of the above except for one of those, a race. How do we know the Jewish people are not a race? Because if you look at Jews from around the world, especially if you visit the land of Israel, you'll see that Jews come in all size, shapes, and colors. And besides that fact, anyone can join the Jewish people. If it was a racial definition, you can't join a race. But being a Jew is not just a national identity, and it's not just a religious identity. It's not just like being American or French or English or Russian, and it's not just like being a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist. It's both. There's a national component and a religious component to the Jewish people. There is a faith, but even a Jew who's not observant, who professes to not even believe in God, is still part of the Jewish people. And there's also a national component. But even a Jew who lives in Israel who's not observant is still part of the Jewish people. So it's complicated, but it's a combination of both. But the Jewish people are definitely a nation. The Jewish people have a land, a language, and a history. Ironically, we would say the Jewish people may have less of those things than most nations. Yes, the Jewish people have a land, and yes, there's been a Jewish state for 70 plus years. But for the last 2,000 years, the majority of the Jewish people have lived in a diaspora outside the land of Israel. Yes, the Jewish people have a language, Hebrew. But for more than 2,000 years, Hebrew was not a dead language, but it wasn't a spoken language. Only recently has it been resurrected as the national language of the Jewish state. And yes, the Jewish people have a history. But for thousands of years, Jews scattered around the world had very different histories from each other. But interestingly enough, to find people as old as the Jewish people who have survived, because if you look in history books, there are many ancient people. If you read the Bible, Hyksos, Phoenicians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Mycenaeans, where are all these people today? They're gone. If you want to visit them, you have to go to a museum or a history book. So ironically, the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, that has had such a crazy history and has spent so much of its time as a nation scattered around the world, is one of the oldest surviving nations on the planet Earth. Back in the land of Israel today, after 2,000 years of exile, the Jewish people have taken a licking, but they kept on ticking. I'm Ken Spiro, and you're watching JTV.
I always appreciate this guy's description of Judaism because of the three religions, this is the one I probably know the least. I don't have any friends that I know who are Jewish, and I've only been exposed a couple of times. Many years ago, I attended a bar mitzvah in Seattle, and then when I lived in Virginia, um, my dad was thinking of converting to Judaism, and I think we went to a synagogue in Newport News. Maybe those of you who are Jewish might be familiar with it. Um, I think this was Reformed. I think this was Reformed. Anyway, my dad was thinking, he never did convert, but he was thinking of it. So that's been my only exposure, other than what, of course, we all know about the Holocaust during World War II. So I appreciate what this guy here has to say about Judaism.
What?
So this this is my introduction to Judaism. Ah, right here. This is a scene, two scenes from a movie from the 1950s called The Ten Commandments. This was my introduction to ancient history and the Hebrews and Judaism and all the rest of it. Um, if you're not familiar with this is the story of Moses, who was chosen by God to free the Hebrew slaves. They had been slaves to the Egyptians for generations. Uh, and God finally decided it was time for the Hebrews to be freed, and he had a promised land set aside for them called Canaan. And so he instructed Moses to approach the Pharaoh of Egypt numerous times and beg for the people to be freed. Each time the Pharaoh said, "No, I'm not going to do it," God sent a plague upon Egypt. I think one time he turned the Nile River to blood, and then he had locusts and flaming hail and all kinds of pestilence that he put upon the Egyptians. Finally, uh, God decided that he would destroy the firstborn of every family in Egypt. And that would have included the Hebrew children. However, Moses instructed the people, the Hebrews, to paint lamb's blood over their doorway so that when the angel of death came, the angel would pass over. Remember the term for Easter, Passover. This is where it comes from. Would pass over the doorway. At least I think that's where it came from. And so that the Hebrew children would be spared. And unfortunately, Moses did lose he had his only child, his young boy, he died. And he was so saddened by that that he finally told Moses he could take the people and go. Well, how many were there? 50,000, 100,000, and they had to cross the desert. I think it was a 40-mile journey, and that moving that many people would take a long time. So he finally rounded up all the Hebrews, and they're on their way, and they come to the Red Sea, and they're taking a respite. They don't know how they're going to get around the Red Sea to get to Canaan. Well, unfortunately, by this time, the Pharaoh has decided that he's changed his mind and he wants the Hebrews back, or he wants them destroyed. I don't know, but he sends out his entire chariot army. And when they approach the Hebrews resting at the Red Sea, God puts up a wall of flame so they cannot go through. And so the Hebrews are kind of stuck there. They have the Egyptians on one side and the Red Sea on the other. So in the movie version, you see, well, it's in the Old Testament too, where Moses parts the Red Sea, as you see here. And then the Hebrews cross, they go across the bottom, they get to the other side. And at that point, God lowers the flame, and instead of stopping, the charioteers decide they're going to go after the Hebrews. So after all the charioteers are in underneath and they're down there chasing the Hebrews, Moses brings his hands back together, and the Red Sea just drowns all of the Egyptians and their chariot horses. Yeah. And so then the Hebrews were allowed to move along their way to the promised land. The scene on the left depicts a time when you can imagine the difficulties of moving 100,000, let's just say 100,000 for the sake of argument, across the desert, people looking for food, people getting into arguments about things. And it was at this point that Moses ascended to Mount Sinai, where he received the Ten Commandments from God, and that's what he brings down, so that the Hebrews in their new nation can live under a certain order, structure. Don't do this. Don't kill. Don't covet your neighbor's property. Honor thy mother and father. You've probably heard of the Ten Commandments. And so these scenes were portrayed in. It's a very famous movie from the 1950s. It's one of those 3.5 to 4 hour long flicks called The Ten Commandments. So if you're interested in it, I'm sure you can find it at iTunes. So Jewish people, if you're a Christian, you're familiar with the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Jewish people do not honor the New Testament. As far as I know, I think they believe if Jesus lived, they believed he was a philosopher and a teacher, but not the Son of God, not someone who came down to die for our sins. So the Jewish people rely more on the Old Testament that they call the Torah. The Torah is the Jewish Bible, also known by Christians as the Old Testament. The word Torah means God's teaching. The Torah contains the basic laws of Judaism and tells many stories about the history of the Hebrew people. If you're a Christian, you've probably been to Bible studies, or at least you've done some reading of the Old Testament where you understand what he's talking about here, when it's mentioned that there are stories and the laws were written down, and it's where you have Noah's Ark and the creation of Adam and Eve, and the prophets and the beautiful Psalms and Ecclesiastes and all the rest of it is contained in what we call the Old Testament. So, again, if you're Christian, if you're Roman Catholic, you may have experienced. That's how I grew up. My two rites of passage as a young Catholic boy were First Communion when I was 7, and then confirmation when I was 9. I think in Protestant churches there is no ceremony for communion, but there is for confirmation, and I think it happens later when a student is around 13 or 14. And so these rites of passage are also very common in the Jewish faith. They're called the bar and the bar mitzvah. I think for girls, the bar mitzvah, the bat mitzvah is like 12, and for boys, the bar mitzvah is 13. And so I'm sure what happens is the students they spend about a year in training, learning how to read from the Torah, and then when the day of their ceremony arrives, they read from the Torah. I'm sure there's a ceremony, and then there's a party afterwards. What it is, it's a rite of passage that alerts this young people that they now, in the eyes of the church, they have become adults. It doesn't mean legally they are. They're still children. They can still enjoy things of their age, but in the eyes of the church, they have just become more responsible and more adult-like in the eyes of the synagogue, excuse me. So that's what a bar and a bar mitzvah are. And then most of us are familiar with the Jewish people from the Holocaust, which was the attempt during World War II on the part of Nazi Germany to eliminate an entire, even though the guy in the first video said Judaism is not a race, the entire Jewish population of the world, if they wanted to, if they could. And I think they accomplished quite a feat by eliminating almost 6 million Jewish people by various means. So most of us know about the Jewish people from the Holocaust. Okay. So now let's take a look at Christianity.
About 2,000 years ago, in a far-flung province in the Middle East, a man emerged from the desert with a message. One that would radically alter the course of world events and come to define the lives of billions. Christianity is a monotheistic religion that centers on the teachings of Jesus Christ, believed to be the Son of an almighty universal God. It is through faith in Jesus Christ and his teachings that believers have access to God and the afterlife. The Christian religion began about 2,000 years ago in the province of Judea in the Middle East. It was a sect of the overarching religion at the time, Judaism, and originally had very few followers. What's known about Christianity's earliest days in the life of Jesus Christ comes from 4 books called the Gospels. The Gospels hold that Jesus was born in the first decade BC in the region of Judea. His father was named Joseph, and his mother was named Mary. According to tradition, Jesus was immaculately conceived by God. In some accounts, Jesus had been trained as a carpenter or a builder, but by the age of 30, he took to preaching, saying that forgiveness of past sins was the key to achieving righteousness. However, the Jewish religious leaders and Roman rulers of the region declared Jesus an agitator. They had him arrested and crucified, nailed to a wooden cross and left to die. But the story of Jesus doesn't end with his death. According to the Gospels, the body of Jesus was resurrected by God, his Father. If Jesus had built the foundations of the Christian faith, it was a Greek-speaking Jew named Paul who made it a religion. According to Paul, God revealed Jesus Christ to him in a vision. Paul then converted to Christianity and made it his mission to see Christ's teachings as an institution by establishing churches across the Roman Empire. Paul's actions catapulted Christians from an esoteric Jewish sect to a society of worshipers with reach across the known world. Over the next 2 millennia, Christianity would go through an unprecedented journey. Scriptures such as the Gospels would be gathered and translated to form Christianity's sacred text, the Bible. The Christian faith would branch into many denominations and be practiced by followers on all 7 continents. And the number of Jesus Christ's followers would grow to 2 billion, making Christianity the world's largest religion. While religious practice, ritual, and tradition have changed according to the spiritual needs and desires of its billions of adherents worldwide, A man from Judea's simple message of peace and forgiveness remains just as powerful now as it did 2,000 years ago.
Okay, so there in a nutshell, you have the explanation of Christianity, which is broken up into numerous sects, SECTS, Roman Catholicism, and then Protestantism. I think um, Episcopalians are a form of Catholicism, but in the Protestant, there is the Lutherans and the Methodists and other Baptists and other denominations. I was brought up a Roman Catholic. My parents put I and my siblings through Roman Catholic school and church. I was the only one of the four of us who went through all 8 years of school and then 4 years of high school, all devoted to Catholicism, or at least that was the plan. I mean, they were Catholic schools. But later I broke away and became involved with the Lutherans, which then had two or three branches, and then eventually became involved heavily for a while in the 90s with the United Methodists. And as of now, as I'm aging, I just find I have more questions than I do answers. So I just sort of take life each day. Um, it's not that I'm anti-Christ or anti-Jesus, but I've just reached a point where it doesn't matter to me if God and Jesus do exist or do not exist. It doesn't really change the way that I function as a person. So those things just don't matter to me right now. I think the moral values of just trying to pursue moral values and integrity, honesty, truthfulness, etc. If I wake up each day and try to pursue those, then maybe I am following a religion without knowing it. Anyway, that I'm trying. I won't. I'm not going to spend the whole time talking about my historical past with religion, but that's it. All right, so here's one that is really caught me off guard when this hit me. Of course, throughout all of my 12 years in Catholic education in the 50s and 60s, I was brought up with the Jesus image on the left, and that is, I think that technically the holy cards that would be called the Sacred Heart Jesus, but it's a Eurocentric view of Jesus. The white, he's attractive, has a beard, flowing hair, young. Um, this is the image that I was brought up with, and then years later, I started learning that if Jesus existed and was lived in the area of the world where he's said to have lived, he would have looked more like the man on the right. And that made a lot of sense to me, given the nature of the people who live in the Middle East. He would look more like this than the one on the left. But again, we're talking about if Jesus died in 33 A.D. on the cross. I'm about ready to sneeze here, so my apology for that. I have to run my desk fan here when I'm at the desk because they have lights over me, and there's probably dust on the fins. And so if I'm going to sneeze, it's always going to be during a class. Sorry. Uh, yeah, Jesus died in 33 AD. It was the church began to emerge years after that with the early church fathers around 100, and then slowly evolved into I think the Catholic Church became the first official church because there was a pope and priests, etc., and then the massive cathedrals that were built throughout the early Middle Ages. It wasn't until Martin Luther's revolt in the 1500s that the religion of Protestantism emerged. So I'm kind of guessing that if there was an organized church between the time of Christ's death and uh, Luther's revolt, that was probably the Roman Catholic Church was the dominant one. And so there were no definitive images of Jesus. So each generation or each part of the world that subscribed to Christianity, if they painted Jesus or used images of Jesus, they simply did based on templates from art in their history. And this is the one that emerged. This one on the left is the one that emerged that carried itself through all of my 12 years in school. So this is just interesting to see Jesus probably look more like the guy on the right. So what color was Jesus? This is again, we're talking about the color of Jesus. This is from the movie Malcolm X with Denzel Washington playing Malcolm X, who is he's in prison. Um, he was the one who he was brought up in Detroit, and as a young man, he was a criminal, and so it was while he was in prison that he discovered the religion of Islam, and then later became Malcolm X. But here is a great scene from the movie.
And the thief cometh not but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. But I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. St. John 10, verse 10. Are there any questions?
Hey, watch it, baby. This cat is heavy on religion.
I can see this has become a struggle between good and evil. Satan has a question.
Yes, sir, Chaplain Gill, but since neither one of us are God, I don't think either one of us are in any position to say who's good and who's evil.
Why don't you just ask your question?
We were discussing the disciples. What color were they?
Well, I don't think we know that for certain.
But they were Hebrews, were they not?
That's right.
As was Jesus. Jesus was also a Hebrew.
Why don't you just ask your question?
What color were the original Hebrews?
I have told you that we don't know that for certain.
Then you can't believe for certain that Jesus was white.
Just a moment, just a moment. God is white. Isn't it obvious?
Well, that is obvious, but we don't know if it's obvious that God is white. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that Jesus did not have blonde hair and blue eyes. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that the images of Jesus that are on prison walls and churches throughout the world are not historically correct, because history teaches us that Jesus was born in a region where the people had color. There's proof in the very Bible that you ask us to read in Revelations, 1st chapter, verse 14 and 15, that Jesus had hair like wool and feet the color of brass.
Just what are you saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm proving to you that Jesus was not, and I might quote one of our Indian brothers, he was not a paleface.
Aha.
Amen.
Isn't that interesting?
I absolutely love that scene. I love that scene. That's another movie that you can get rent from iTunes if you want. I don't think I own that one, but it's another one of those long, long movies. I absolutely love that scene. Okay, this is where I'll spend a little time, if you don't mind. This is Jesus depicted. This is depicting Jesus performing some of his miracles, if he was God, the Son of God. The one on the top left, I think, is the loaves and the fishes, where he created the miracle of providing enough food for everyone who had come to hear him speak. The one down below in the right is probably one in which he cured some disease in somebody, or eyesight or something. The point being that even if, irregardless of these physical miracles, what Jesus had was the ability to see inside people, to see deep down inside. He could see the pain that many people kept from him or kept hidden inside. Most of us don't like showing our pain or agonies when we're out in public. And I'm sure it was the same in Christ's time. And so with Jesus, if he was the Son of God, he had that ability to see inside people, and he could see that pain and that agony, and he could respond to them in like kind. And I think if nothing else, this is an important lesson for us to take away from the life of Christ, whether you believe in him or not. It doesn't matter. You can adopt one of the values that Christ had, or possessed, and that is the ability to see inside people. What that means for us is we are given the opportunity. We're not gods, but we are given the opportunity to take a deeper look at the people who are important in our lives. That can be our intimate partners, it can be family, it can be siblings, it can be close friends. It doesn't mean we do it with everybody, but if we start to understand more about the people who are closest to us, and I mean taking a deeper look at who they are inside, we can probably avoid a lot of conflict. You can almost start predicting, if you do this, you can almost start predicting how those closest to you will respond in certain situations, or what they might say about a particular topic. You could almost predict that. And once you understand the depth of another person, another human being, you can avoid a lot of conflict by being able to respond to that person in like kind, having that deeper understanding of him or her. Often, what happens, and I've been in relationships in the past in which she and I would start fighting, and then we would find ways to push each other's buttons to make things even worse. And this doesn't help anything. And the point being is that if we can start practicing this way of looking at other people with those who are closest to us, then it becomes a little bit easier to work with or to communicate with people who think differently than we do, who are not that close to us. Think about where we are today. All of a sudden now we're red and blue states. My God, when I was growing up, no one talked that way. Republicans and Democrats got along pretty well. They may have had differences of opinions, but they could argue with each other in the House or the Senate and then go off to lunch together. And they managed to work together to find problems. Today, it seems as if there's more division than ever. And we've done this red and blue state thing now for a while. I don't know how healthy that is. But the point is, and I'm not taking one side or the other as far as this class is concerned. I'm just saying that's the way it seems to be right now. And if you are in one arena or the other, it might help if you can understand more about what the other person is thinking. And if we can do that on a person-to-person level, think how it would be if countries could do this with other countries. If we could, we might not be at war with Iran right now. Maybe we wouldn't have fought Vietnam or World War II or anything if there was more of this deeper understanding. I know it's impossible sometimes, and it doesn't always work, but I think the point that we can take away from the essence of Jesus, whether you believed he existed or not, is this ability of his to see inside other people on a deeper level, and it's good for us to aspire to that. That's what I try and do in my life every day. Anyway, this is the one part of Jesus's life that I admire the most, and the one that I try to emulate. And then I think we already covered this in the video that there was the Last Supper, where Jesus knew he was going to be betrayed by Judas Iscariot and be taken off to a trial where he was tried for being an agitator. We know that Jesus was carried his cross up to Calvary, and that he was crucified on the cross. This image is a little bit different from what I was brought up to believe. I was taught that Jesus was the only one who had nails put in his hands and feet, that the two robbers on either side of him were just tied to the cross. And it looks as though that one on Jesus' right, it did have his hands nailed to the cross. So that could be just this painter's interpretation of the crucifixion. But if you believe if you're a Christian, you believe Jesus died, and it was said that as he was expiring, he exclaimed to God, "God, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And it was required that he die for our sins now, our sins. But the promise was that after 3 days, his body would resurrect and he would ascend into heaven, or his spirit would ascend into heaven to live eternally with God. And so this is the promise for Christians who believe in God and Christianity, is that once we all physically expire, that our souls will ascend into heaven and remain happily with God forever and ever if we've tried to live a good life down here. That's the promise of Christianity. So now let us take a look at Islam, okay? This is the rise of Islam. And we're talking about, what did I just say? That Christ died about, if we believe the chronology of Christ's life, he died in about 33 AD. So now we're talking about a man named Muhammad, who is a business person in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and we're talking about in the 500s. So we're talking about 500 years later. And other than the growth of Christianity in the Byzantine Empire, what's happened is that people have lost sight of the message of Christ and have gone back to worshiping multiple gods and goddesses. And this is what's happening in Mecca at the time. There is a special worship space there called the Kaaba. I think I have an image of it here in another slide. But this is a connection that's supposed to exist between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is that Islam recognizes that the Kaaba, the holy place, was part of a covenant made between Abraham and God. And it involved the construction of this holy place in which the one God was supposed to be worshiped. But now we've had all this time pass, and the worship of many gods has fallen into place. So we have Muhammad here as a successful businessman in Mecca, and one of his hobbies apparently, and those of you who are Muslim, if I say anything incorrectly, please feel free to send me an email correcting me on the details. But it was my understanding that Muhammad enjoyed exploring caves around Mecca. And it was while he was exploring these caves that he was met with an angel of God, an angel of God descended down and began communicating with Muhammad. And it was through these communications that eventually emerged the book Quran, which is the holy book for Muslims. We just said that. We just learned that the Torah is the holy book for Jewish people. The Bible is the holy book for Christian people, and the Quran is the holy book for Muslims. And when Muhammad tried to bring this message back to the city of Mecca, to the city fathers, they kind of laughed at him and said, "No, we're not going back to the worship of one God." And the reason, partly for that, is that Mecca was on a very loose level. It was like Saudi Arabia's Las Vegas. Pilgrims would go there and spend their money and have a good time, and then they would go to the Kaaba and they would worship whatever god or goddess was popular at the time. And the city fathers didn't want to lose that kind of popularity or that income. So eventually, Muhammad he left Mecca and he wound up in that upper arrow, Medina, however it's pronounced. And there he became a mediator. He helped people solve problems, and it was through that skill that helped the religion of Islam become sort of solidified. Then there were years that passed where there were conflicts between the emerging Muslims and the townspeople in Mecca, and finally there is this triumphant march of Muslims. Some say 10,000 of them dressed in white, marched back into Mecca, where they reclaim Mecca as the holy city. And even today, you have Muslims who face east 5 times a day to pray, and they pray towards Mecca. And there is a scene from a great movie. Do I have that scene? Yeah, no, I don't. No, I don't. There is a movie that you might want to watch sometime. It's called The Message, the story of Islam. It goes back to the 60s. It's very well done, but it is a 3-hour movie. You can't find it at iTunes, but you can find it on YouTube. And it depicts this triumphant march of the Muslims back into Mecca. And they the producers even tried to be sensitive to the request of Muslims that an image of Muhammad not be shown. So whenever Muhammad is in a scene in the movie, it's always from his perspective, as if he's the one holding the camera, so that viewers don't see him, and he's the one who goes into the Kaaba, and he takes down, in a symbolic gesture, takes down one of the false gods. And at that point, we see that the Kaaba, which you see here, is reclaimed by the Muslims, and it becomes the worship place of the one God, Allah, is according to Muslim tradition. And I think that what you see here is especially the one on the bottom right is there are 5 pillars of prayer in Islam, and one of them is the Hajj, Hajj, and what that is a pilgrimage. It's not required, but it's urged that if you can, wherever you are in the world, at one point in your life, try to come to Mecca to worship around the Kaaba. And my understanding is that not everybody gets to go into the Kaaba. It is a holy place. If you see that semicircle at the base of the Kaaba, from what I read recently, that was the original construction site of the Kaaba. So those people there are actually inside what's remaining of the old Kaaba, and it has been reconstructed to what it is now. My guess is this is a special holy day, maybe, I don't know, but you see what appears to be hundreds or at least maybe thousands of Muslims surrounding the Kaaba as their holy place. It would be like Catholics going to the Basilica in Rome. Yeah. Okay, so that's the Kaaba. So let's take a look at modern day Islam.
We need to talk about Islam. You know, that religion with 1.6 billion people comprising about 25% of the world's population? Yeah, that Islam. You see, Islam is currently the world's 2nd largest religion. Christians, don't worry, you're still number 1. Even though it's been around for 1,400 years, Islam is still woefully misunderstood, especially in the United States. Despite what your crazy but lovable uncle says on Facebook, Islam does not promote hate. I'm not commanded to kill the infidels. Quran. The Quran, as a whole, promotes faith, hope, and peace. So, when you see stuff like this, know that it's always taken out of context. And if you don't believe me, let's ask the experts.
If I were to open up a book like Harry Potter and just chose one line where it's the excruciatus spell, where it's like, cause the most pain you possibly can, and say, this is what Harry Potter is teaching. That's sort of how people look at the Quran.
Sharia. Politicians seem to be obsessed with this Arabic word.
What is this thing that we call Sharia?
Sharia.
51%, highly respected number of polling groups, want to be governed according to Sharia. You know what Sharia is?
A lot of people don't actually know what Sharia is.
Sharia is often translated as law. It doesn't really mean that. It means a path or guidance. How do you give charity? How do you get married? How do you pray? It's guidelines on how to live your life.
Oh, and an FYI, trolls, there are currently 0 bills in Congress trying to institute Sharia. That's a conspiracy theory, and a pretty dumb one. Jihad. America is only familiar with jihad in its most violent form, the idea that Islam should defend itself against those who wish to tear it down. It's an Arabic word that means exerted effort or struggle to better oneself. So Muslims can do a jihad to get more sleep, to go out on more dates, to get their lazy butt off the ground and hit the gym, all legitimate forms of jihad. Hijab. There is a strange, sick obsession with Muslim women who cover their hair. The internet is filled with images and commentary about Muslim women fashion and appearances written by people who frankly don't understand it or are afraid of it.
In the Quran, there are about two verses amongst 6,000 verses that address how we should conduct ourselves when we talk about modesty. Hijab is actually not a word that's used in the Quran. I choose to dress this way. For me, it really is an outside expression of an inward experience.
People tend to think Muslim women are limited, and honestly, some are. However, reality check. There have been way more female heads of state in Muslim countries than in the United States.
There are a few Muslim countries, such as Saudi Arabia, that limit Muslim women's rights. They're taking God-given rights that God has given to women and imposing their own views and opinions on what it is that women need to do and not do. They're the ones that are contradicting Islam. They're the ones that are bringing in alien influences into the faith, not the other way around.
Arab. Arab. Do not assume an Arab equals a Muslim or a Muslim equals an Arab. Let me break it down. Muslim is a term that refers to a person who follows the religion of Islam. Arab is a cultural, linguistic, and ethnic term broadly referring to Arabic-speaking people in the Middle East and North Africa. There are millions of non-Muslims in Arab-majority countries who happen to be Christian, Zoroastrian, Baha'i, even atheists. Hopefully, this has cleared up some of the garbage that jams up your news feed. And remember, Islam, like any other religion, is complex and requires more than one video to understand it. So, keep reading. Talk to actual Muslims, visit a mosque, and remember, an entire religion can never be summed up in just one meme.
I appreciate this because of what he said. My son and I actually have a good friend in California who is Muslim. And my son, Sam, is a plumber, and my son has worked with him. And so in that relationship, we got to know Sam as a friend. And Sam and his we know Sam and his entire family, and they're just super people. But that is how we learned more about Islam, was through Sam. Yeah. So what's next? Ramadan. Maybe some of you are not familiar with Ramadan, and I'll tell you quickly. If you're not familiar with Southern California, well, then you are familiar with the weather that you have there in Virginia. And I've experienced it. The first 2 summers I was there, I remember days in July where it hit 110, 115 degrees, which can be replicated in California. But the one thing Southern California doesn't have that Virginia and the whole eastern seaboard has is humidity. I grew up with humidity in Chicago. In the years I lived in Virginia, it was still hard to get used to. The apartment I lived in Hampton, I could walk from my apartment on a very humid morning, and this was like 5:30 in the morning. I could walk from the apartment to the truck, and by the time I got there, I was already sweating. So when I say that, you know what I'm talking about the humidity. In California, they can have very hot days, but it's usually a drier heat, like desert heat. And Ramadan is a time when Muslims fast severely. I mean, they take it seriously. And I guess there were times when my son was working with Sam, where Sam would not have any food from early morning before sunrise to when his family would eat again after sunset. And that included even water. So imagine yourself, think about the heat and humidity you have going all day. Maybe if some of you are Muslim, you've already done this, going all day without even drinking water. And Sam did this very faithfully, and it impressed both of us. So let's take a look at the history of what Ramadan is.
This is the first food 14-year-old Ali and his family have had all day. They haven't had anything to eat or drink since sunrise this morning. It's because they're celebrating a special time of year in their religion called Ramadan. Ali is a Muslim, which means he follows the religion of Islam. During the month of Ramadan, most Muslim people do something called fasting. That means they don't eat or drink anything between sunrise and sunset for a whole month. They can't even drink water through the day. It's pretty tough, but for people like Ali, it's a really important part of his religion.
It's just to feel how the poor people feel. You know, they don't get to have a lot of water and food, so that's mostly what it's about. It's a test, yeah.
Just like other religions, Islamic people have certain times of the year to celebrate their faith, and Ramadan is one of them. During that month, they spend more time thinking about their religion, kind of like Christmas or Easter for Christians, or Rosh Hashanah for Jewish people. During Ramadan, Muslim people learn more about the Islamic religion by reading from their religious book, which is called the Quran. And the fasting is to help them focus on that. Each year, Ramadan starts on a slightly different date. because the name Ramadan is actually the name of a month in the Islamic calendar. And that calendar is a little bit different because it's based on the cycles of the moon. Although many Muslims don't eat or drink through the day during Ramadan, they do have some extra big meals before dawn and after sunset. Because having no food or water at all for a whole month would be impossible. But even with these big meals, Ali says Ramadan can still be pretty hard.
It's a little bit hard, especially if you have, like, sometimes we have football games and yeah, we still play, but yeah, we don't drink water.
And he and his cousins say going to school can be tricky too.
Usually my friends come with these amazing lunches from like different places, and then I'm like in the classroom and they're all eating their lunch in recess, and I'm like, you know, waiting for the bell to go and stuff, so that's probably the hardest part.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard. I get hungry really easily, so.
I haven't told anyone about it because I moved to this new school and I haven't fasted there yet. Tomorrow will be my first day fasting at my new school.
Around the world, there are more than 1.6 billion Muslim people. That's almost 1/4 of the world's population. But not all of them fast during Ramadan. People who are pregnant, elderly, or people who are sick often don't. And kids only start doing it after they've reached puberty. But some do practice fasting before then, often just for a few days. Ali has been fasting for Ramadan since he was 10, and he says it's a bit easier this time.
Oh, it was really hard back then. You get more used to it.
And although it's a tough month, these guys love learning about their religion. And it doesn't hurt that there's a big party called Eid when the month wraps up.
At the end we get this big celebration, we go to the mosque and do like our morning prayer and stuff like that, and it's like really fun to meet up with family and stuff.
Well, there's a lot of food, we're allowed to eat, yeah, so, and there's rides and it's a lot of fun.
Ramadan can be a real challenge, but these guys wouldn't have it any other way.
I love it how the young girl talks about getting together with family and friends, and the young boy talks about the food part. All right, so now you've had, if you're not familiar with any of these religions, you've been given some information about all three separately. Now, this is our last slide. Let's take a look at 10 connections between all three religions.
Hey guys, welcome back to FTD Facts. My name is Leroy Kenton, and in this episode I'm looking at 10 ways in which Christianity, Islam, and Judaism are connected. Now, it's a common question that people have, and before I get into everything, the varying views may not necessarily fit every branch of each religion. That would take years to do a video on that. So I'm just going to be sharing, generally speaking, based on the most popular beliefs of each religion. So let's get right into it. The first similarity I want to share is Abraham. Abraham is an important figure in all three religions. That's why you may often hear Christianity, Judaism, and Islam referred to as the Abrahamic religions. According to the Bible, Abraham and his son Ishmael are said to be the founding fathers of the Arabic people in which Islam stemmed out of. Abraham and his other son Isaac, who he had with his wife Sarah, are said to be the founding fathers of the Jewish nation. Jesus, who Christians claim to be God in human form, was born out of the Jewish nation. So that's where that similarity comes from. The next thing is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are also monotheistic religions. All of them claim to worship the true God of creation, who is all-powerful and controls the universe. They share the common belief of the oneness of God, which is what the term monotheism means. Now, the view of God does vary in the sense that Muslims and Jews believe that God is one, singular. Christians, on the other hand, believe God is one, but in the compounding sense of the term. What I mean by that is one made up of multiple entities, like in the case of God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, each of them having different roles, but still pointing to one God. Another similarity is the belief in the supernatural guidance of history, as well as God being very active throughout human history in his interactions with human beings. An example of this would be God inspiring new prophets to share messages with people, God giving people visions, God sending angels, etc., all to reveal things to humans that impact the course of humanity. Now, the next similarity ties into the previous one. All these three religions stress moral responsibility and accountability of human beings, and that there will actually be a judgment day where everyone will either be given an eternal reward or a punishment. They all emphasize their special covenant or promise with God. For Judaism, the covenant was made through Moses. In Christianity, it was made through Jesus, and in Islam, it was through the Prophet Muhammad. Christianity accepts God's covenant made to the Jews, but generally believe it was superseded with the coming of Jesus. That's why you'll hear Christians speak of the New Covenant or the New Testament. Similarly, in Islam, Muslims recognize Judaism and Christianity. However, Islam is believed to supersede all those others and invite Jews and Christians to believe as they do. They share a common belief also in all, if not most, of the biblical prophets from Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, you name it, as well as King David, King Solomon, and others who were not necessarily prophets like Mary, the mother of Jesus. The scriptures of the three Abrahamic religions also have similarities too. The Jewish holy book consists of the Tanakh and the Talmud. Christians adopted the Tanakh for their Bible, but it's called the Old Testament. Now, the Quran also tells similar stories like the crucifixion of Jesus. However, it's told differently, and Muslims believe that the scriptures of the Jews and Christians were corrupted, and the Quran has the most accurate narrative of similar stories like the crucifixion of Jesus that's found in the New Testament of the Christian Bible. Pilgrimages are another similarity. So Mecca, of course, in Islam, that's the famous destination for Muslims, and doing a pilgrimage to Mecca is called Hajj, which is one of the pillars of Islam. Jews journey to Jerusalem, the holiest city for them, and Roman Catholics journey to Santiago de Compostela. Peace is also a central concept of all three religions. This is reflected historically in their use of similar greetings, all meaning peace be upon you. There's Shalom Alaikum in Judaism, there's Pax Vobiscum in Christianity, and Salam Alaikum in Islam. Oftentimes, though, the greetings of peace are used mainly just to refer to the members of one's own faith community. You wouldn't be going around and saying that to every single person that you meet. They also share belief in common specific names for God. So Muslims use the Arabic term Allah that refers generally to God. There's also a list of 99 other names, and each of them describe a characteristic of God. The 100th name, though, is said to be unspeakable. Similarly, Christians and Jews also have specific names for their God, like Elohim or Yahweh. However, those names are often seen as too holy to speak, so many versions of the Bible will replace those names with just general words like Lord or God. So there you have it. So those are 10 ways in which Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are all similar. Hope you guys all learned something, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments down below in the comments section. Now, I do have a similar video to this. If you want to check that out, it's going to be right here for you. You can click on it.
Okay, I'll let you click on that if you want to. I always appreciate this video clip and his expression or his connections amongst the three religions. All right, that is it.
Hey guys, welcome back to FTD Facts. My name is Leroy.
Oops, sorry. Let's go to the assignment, and I know I've gone over time, and I apologize for that, but sometimes when we're covering a lot of topics, and besides, I'm really anxious to get into and fix that one. I can see where I made my mistake, even compounded the mistake with that next. So heirs to the Roman Empire are going to be, so that what's happened is the lecture is that day, but the assignment won't be due until the 8th. I don't know what I was thinking. You know what? I'm going to have to go through and look at every one of these to make, from here on out, to make sure I've done this properly. The trouble is I get carried away with trying to get all this done with different classes. Some are 12 weeks, some are 6 weeks, some are 8 weeks, some are 16 weeks. All right, so now I'm better. Sorry about my apology for that. It's actually the 8th because the lecture is going to be on the 31st, so I can't have you committing to the assignment on the 1st of April, the next day. All right, so I know some of you have already done this, and I'm so appreciative. And thank you for your patience while I sort this all out. I will go through and check the rest of the assignments to make sure I have the correct due dates for those. In the meantime, let us go to the 3 religions. And your assignment for this will be due on April 1st. Okay. All right. So later on, I'll have, I don't have a reading here. I'll see if I can find one. No one's done this yet. I'll have the lecture recording here. So it's a discussion board. Maybe I'll just leave it without the reading because unless I find something that is a further connection of the 3 religions, I think I would want to do that. That young man who just did the video did an excellent job, I think, with his 10 points. But if I can find a reading that connects the 3 of them, I'll insert it here for those of you who might be interested in that. But this is a discussion board, and so your options are, and they include summarize the bar and bar mitzvah and what these rites of passage mean to young Jewish men and women. Research the Quran and compare it to the Christian Bible and Jewish Torah in a general way. You have 3 paragraphs. You can do that in a general way. The 4th one is analyze the character of Jesus and its impact on humans at his time and now in ours now. Okay. And then you always have the option, choose a topic of your own that relates to an interest of yours and can connect to one or all 3 of the religions discussed. So if you're Jewish, Christian, or Muslim and you want to focus on some aspect of your particular religion, that's fine. If you would like to do some research on a religion about which you know nothing, please do that, okay, and share that with us. And at this point for that, I would also say, if it's another religion besides these 3, feel free to, especially if it's one that you practice that's not one of these 3, feel free to go ahead and share that with your fellow students, all right? Because I think the more that we can understand each other in a deeper way, going back to that image of Christ, I think the better we can be, the better equipped we are to engage in conversation on polite manners rather than all this chaos that's going on now. Anyway, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I will check the assignments for the rest of the 12 weeks to make sure I have the correct due dates. And I do apologize for that one on heirs of the Roman Empire. And I appreciate your patience with me while I get this sorted out. All right, that's it. So I will see you next week when I will actually do the lecture on the heirs of the Roman Empire. And if you've already done the assignment, then you don't have to worry about it. All right. Okay. Thank you, folks. Have a good week. Stay cool if you're going to warm up. I don't know what your temperatures are going to be. Let's see. It's March. I remember some March where it was pretty cold, even at the end of March, where we had some cold, wet days. All right, folks. Thank you very much. Have a good week.